and it's been good to see some of the openings that we've seen. But remember, all this stuff comes from the labor movement itself. And that's where I want to maybe start transitioning over and respond to some of the criticism. And I'll just say a couple things up top, if that's all right. One, I think it's really important in a moment like this for the left, particularly for socialists, to be able to do a couple things at once. To one, always recognize the fact that all of these victories that you might be seeing from politicians are coming because of the labor movement, right? I have seen people on our side make arguments, for example, that's like, wanting to sort of relitigate 2016, 2020 presidential debates, saying like, oh, all this stuff is happening because of Joe Biden and the NLRB. That is wrong, right? There are conditions that are better for workers and there are conditions that are worse for other workers. And it's good to advocate for policies and laws and all that kind of stuff that are better for unionization. I'm not saying that that's wrong. But it becomes a conservative argument when you say this stuff is emanating from Washington, when this stuff is emanating from politicians, instead of this is coming from everyday workers democratizing their unions, being willing to fight. That's a really important point to make. Two, when we're responding to this criticism, and if you all have any preamble, let me know too. But I think responding to this criticism, it is absolutely all right. If you are a member of the left, of the labor movement, of the socialist movement, to be able to look at labor tactics, labor strategy, and the labor movement with a critical lens to say, we want this to be successful. We want working power to increase. There are good ways to fight, and there are ways that are worse, and there are ways that are terrible, right? So, this is being upset at people for criticism is not, oh, my Lord, somebody's criticizing the labor movement. I'm able to do that. We do that on this program. People in the labor movement do that. People labor notes do that. People Jacobin do that, right? But it has to be something that is sort of rooted in material reality. So one, so that like you don't go far off into the wilderness with your criticism, but two, so that it ends up being helpful and also reflecting the actual conditions that are going on, because we absolutely do need a more militant labor movement. And that's why it's good to be able to do two things at once, to be able to support these developments, to be able to support Shan Fain saying, hey, it's not just wages, right? Which has been an issue in the labor movement in the US for a long time, from a socialist perspective at least, is that it's almost all, do we have higher wages? Do we have higher wages? Do we have higher wages? Higher wages are important, of course, but these things are about freedom. These things are about democracy. These things are about power. You should have a say in your life at work, just like you have a say in your society in a democracy. You should have a right to free time. You should have a right to a life. Those are fights that are going to have to come through the labor movement. What we're seeing right now from the UAW is that they're doing that thing, and that's a damn good thing that's worth supporting. So anyways, I say all that to say that, like, being upset at the criticism is not, oh my Lord, somebody's criticized a labor official or labor leadership, right? I'm offended by that. No, it's what kind of criticism is this? Is this something that's rooted? Is this something that is even oriented at making a stronger labor movement? But that's my preamble. Yeah.
Or is it oriented towards marketing YouTube channels in an attention economy? So you sort of set the table for an I told you so situation. It's like watching David and Goliath and being like, the entire time, like, David better use this exact strategy or he's going to lose. You heard it here first, folks. And then David gets crushed and it's like, yeah, look at that. You should have listened to me. That's what's going on here. I mean, at least in my ungenerous opinion. And yeah, like, I think, if people were within like the UAW, like, and I mean, Fain himself has even talked about, like, this is what I'm saying, like, these dialogues that these people saying aren't happening because like the Democrats get involved, they're happening. And to paint the whole brush that all these people have been duped by like the campaign apparatus of the DNC is, right. I mean, you know what? Maybe that's good for a YouTube channel.
Right. Well, and I want to echo what you said, David, not reflexively critical. And I want to add, when we are critical, I think it's important to be critical in a comradely way when we're not fighting against class enemies. The way that I speak about the way that I speak about disagreements with unions when I do it publicly is going to be totally different than the way that I speak about disagreements with politicians, and also, the level at which a disagreement has to rise. For me, anyway, I'm a union member, so I'm much more reticent to go public with criticisms. I'm more willing to talk about things offline that I have issues with than I am publicly, and I think I think that's what you should do in a movement of comrades, of sisters and brothers, and that's the way that I approach it. Like you said, you certainly should not be reflexively critical of a union. Like, that's just not really a good place to be in. And then when you are critical, I do think it's important to be so in a comradely way, like where you can, which is not to say that there is never a place where you could, where you can say like, okay, I'm going to be critical in like not a comradely way. And we can actually look to who else but Shan Fain for an example of that, where he was interviewed recently, talking about comparing him to his predecessors who, other than the person that he immediately replaced, the last two went to jail for corruption, right? So, he was critical in a not comradely way when he talked about how, leaders in his union, his whole career talked about how we want to live to fight another day. We want to live to fight another day. And he was like, well, another day came and another day went and we never fought. And now anytime I hear that, I want to beat the shit out of somebody. Right. And so, okay, there's, that's a good way to be, I think. Right. And that's just not what I'm seeing from a lot of these people who are being critical of the strategy, is that they are being reflexively critical. And then for most of them, they are not being critical in a comradely way.
Yeah, and maybe we should take a little detour to, I think, what is being mentioned by a lot of these folks. A genuine low point in the Biden administration is the train strike, right? Biden, and I think there's a balance that needs to be struck here. Like, I think I don't support Biden in the way that he handled the train strike. I think they should have got the sick days right then instead of piecemeal after the fact, as has been happening. But I am not quite ready to call Shan Fain a union buster, a scab, for being with Joe Biden after Joe Biden did that to the rail strike. I think we need to actually strike a balance. We need to be aware that yes, we need a stronger labor movement so that can't happen. So it can't be, work with us now and then we'll get you on the back end. And when this can't be seen as like a class conflict victory, right? But there's just a flat out difference. I think between I think a lot of these folks have a tough time admitting that there's a flat out difference between the Democratic Party's relationship with labor and the Republicans. Republicans are adversarial, and the Democrats are transactional, and in a not a great way, right? And that's just reality.
And it's totally fine to have a transactional relationship with a politician, I think. And I actually,
even a Republican.
Exactly. And that's where I was going, because a union for the TVA was fighting against outsourcing their IT workers, back in, this was 2020 or something.
Yeah, we covered it on this program.
I had the president of that local union on my show, and now she's the international president, actually. So they, the union was fighting outsourcing, and who else did they get to headline a rally in Alabama, where 40 of those jobs were, in Huntsville, at the Huntsville office of the TVA, but Jeff Sessions. Okay, and I did not have a problem with that, because it would be one thing if Jeff Sessions went in there and he said, "This is about Biden's EV policy," or whatever, even that's because that wasn't he didn't distract from the issue. He came and he spoke at that rally and he made announcements and he wrote to Trump about the issue, right? Which was the outsourcing of jobs. And he did it in a kind of a xenophobic way. And he hates immigrants and all of this kind of stuff. But he did the thing that the union was asking for. And that is not what even the Republicans who are supporting the strike are doing. It's just a totally different thing that these people are doing. And so, transactional relationships are good, and you just have to get things from the transactions.
Well, let's get to some of these folks. We've been teasing it.
Yeah, we'll start with, I think, this is a nice succinct summary by Sabrina Savoltini about kind of this Democrat infiltrator hypothesis.
I told you a couple of days ago that their Democrat politicians have been infiltrating these unions, and they're having meetings with these union bosses and the presidents and things like that. Next thing you know, they're not going on strike anymore. They're doing this roll out mini strike.
Okay, so there's that's actually really a great clip because that's 15 seconds, and there are like 10 things to jump on. Let's maybe, let's start with the last argument here is that like they're not going on strike anymore, and they've been co-opted by the Democratic Party to not striking. We've talked about this during this thing, but like that is so untethered from the actual material reality of what the stand-up strike has been.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to be totally charitable to her, this was recorded pretty soon after the strike was announced. And to be rightfully uncharitable to her, she has not covered the strike since then, or any of the gains that they have made at the bargaining table, or any of the expansions that they made of the strike at GM and Stellantis. So, not exactly sure if that just doesn't fit into the narrative and she doesn't want to talk about it, or what the issue is there. But, but even then, right, the idea that you're just going to kind of mock this strategy without, critically engaging with it. I mean, it's clear that she was not critically engaging in like, can a strategy of escalation work? And that is really the question here. We talked about this on our program last weekend, but like, escalation is just so fundamental to organizing, to union organizing, to community organizing, to any kind of organizing that you're going to do. You escalate because in most cases you can't actually go all out at any time that you want. You have to escalate, and as you escalate, you build power, and also, you don't want to put a bunch of people at risk if you don't have to get what you want. Because, right, the reason that you strike is not just because it's fun to strike or because, we have like a revolutionary fetish. It is to get things from the company. And so if you can get things from the company without without encouraging your members to go on strike, or without your members having to go on strike, like that's the win-win there, right? And I think as a class struggle unionist, I recognize the value, the educational value of striking for the people that are on strike and for the people who watch it play out in the media. I think it is transformational, but you have to respect and honor people's lives and their livelihoods, and striking is not a thing that you can just tell people to do because that's what you want them to do, because that would help your YouTube show. And that's what's frustrating to me about this, because it seems clear that that's like the only way that they're engaging with this struggle is like, how does it benefit, my YouTube program?
Well, I mean, there's a few things here, and I don't want to front load it because I know we have more clips and things to get to, but I will say that like there's a substitution that is sort of common in a lot of these criticisms, where one position, one tactic is sort of put up as the radical one, and the other one is like the less radical one. And like when you got to think about this, like going on strike, what the UAW is doing, by the way, you just have to completely reject the narrative that they're not on strike. It's bizarre. It's like having an argument, maybe to use like a revolutionary analogy, of like certain kinds of military tactics, right? Like a war of positions, right? Where you entrench a military force in a certain area, or you participate in guerrilla warfare, right? For example, two different types. Neither of those is necessarily more radical than the other, right? They are both means to an end, right? They're both strategies to get a certain kind of goal. And if you came around and said, oh, well, this is the military tactic that is more radical, I think everyone can understand how absurd that argument would be to make. And this is the same kind of thing when you're talking about going on strike, is that this is a tactical decision for how to engage in class struggle against the companies. But I don't want to miss this really important thing that was noted in that clip, is that the saying that the Democratic politicians and operatives have infiltrated the union is, one, wrong, right? Again, as we've noted, the UAWs refused to endorse Biden. has been fairly, moderate in the way it's expressed, but fairly critical of policies that are coming from that party on these kind of things. But
More
most
so than
importantly-
previously.
Right.
Also, just says they infiltrated, and now all of a sudden they're harsher.
But most importantly, what that does is it completely denies the activity and the actions of the union members who are doing this, right? And we've been on the other side. We've been saying to everybody, it's like, we love Shan Fain on this program. I think he's great. I think he's an incredible communicator, and I think that he has been an incredible force for making that union more democratic and more radical, militant, etc. But this is not coming because of Shan Fain fell from the moon. This is coming from a democratic, organized movement within the UAW to fight for these kind of things. So when you push this kind of conspiratorial stuff, right, almost copy and pasted, right, because this is very similar to things that are said about other things too, by the way, by a lot of these folks.
Cornel West is a Democrat because he mentions racism. Sorry. Go ahead.
You are denying, and I don't know if they've said that, just to be fair, but, you are denying like the agency and the activity and the working class movement that is delivering these things right now. And I find that to be very regrettable, to be polite about it.
Totally. And the organization was there before Shan Fain got there, because he couldn't have, you can't just come up into a disorganized group of 140,000 people and, have people go on strike, without some sort of organization being there. And the organization was even there under the previous leadership, right? I don't know how many of these people walked the GM picket lines in 2019, but I did. And I spoke to a lot of those people who were on strike in the Deep South. In Tennessee is where I walked the picket line with these people, and they went on strike, and they had very, very, very few scabs. And when I talked to them on the picket line, I was like, "Why are y'all striking? What's kind of the deal here?" Because on the news, you didn't get a lot of it because the last administration was not nearly as transparent. They more or less just said GM isn't where we want them to be, and so we're going to go on strike. And that's all that the members knew. I was like, what, why are y'all on strike? What is it? Where do they need to move? And they were like, the bargaining team says they're not where they need to be. So, leadership said to go on strike. And so we're going on strike. Right. And that's a strike ready union, right? That you are, that you've got trust in your leadership and you are willing to forego, remember in 2019, 4 months of pay. And that was before the UAWD's caucus was able to push through the $500 a week strike pay. That was 4 months of no paycheck with $275 a week strike pay. Right? This is a strike-ready organization. And so absolutely there's a huge amount of credit that needs to be that needs to go to these people. That when we remove their autonomy, just like the bosses, right? The bosses are the ones who tell us that workers are automatons and cannot produce but for the intelligence of the directing executives. That's the mindset that they're supposed to have, not us, right? And so, absolutely want to echo that, and again compliment the bargaining team for letting the membership and the world in on what's happening at the bargaining table, because that's never happened at the UAW.
Let's make something clear, because I do think that people have different experiences with this. By the way, Jacob. Who gets to have the final say on a contract and whether or not they end up lifting this, right?
The members.
It's not the Democratic Party?
It is not the Democratic Party, actually.
So the
nor
members are
is it
gonna
the
be-
Where does
bargaining
Hillary
team.
come in? Yeah, where does Hillary and Pete
No, but
Buttigieg
let's
come in?
break this down really quick, because I do think that this is actually something that a lot of people don't understand. Is that when they get a contract from these big three and they end up maybe deciding to potentially end this strike, the final say will come from rank and file.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what happened in Canada, where, the Unifor, the union that represents auto workers in Canada, they just ratified a tentative agreement with Ford. The membership ratified it. Now, it was very small, and so the percentage that ratified it was 54%. So you could tell it was pretty controversial to ratify a contract among the Canadian union members while their American sisters and brothers were on strike, fighting for more. But it was ratified by who? The members, not by the liberals in Canada, and it will not be ratified by the Democrats in the United States. And so what happens is when bargaining starts, or sometimes in the middle of bargaining, but there will be what's called a strike authorization vote, and that is not contrary to the belief of some. A vote about a strike strategy, or even whether or not to strike, right? Because there are many a times where a strike authorization vote is taken and they don't strike, and the members vote to ratify the contract, as happened at UPS. And so if you think that a strike authorization vote is a vote to strike, and yet the members voted to ratify a deal without a strike, you're going to be kind of confused about what's going on. And so it's important to understand that's not what's happening. When they vote yes in a strike authorization vote, what they're doing is empowering the committee to call a strike if necessary. Does not have a strike plan, does not have a commitment to strike anywhere or at any particular time. It is empowering the committee to call a strike kind of when and where they feel like they need to as bargaining dictates. And then if the committee doesn't feel like there needs to be a strike and they have a tentative agreement, they kick it to the membership and the membership votes on it. And at that point, the membership is empowered to reject the contract with the implicit mandate to strike, or accept the contract and say, this is fine. We don't have to strike. I like what I've been given. Right? It's in the members' hands. It's kind of the short and sweet of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important point. And I know we have another clip that we want to get to, right? So let's jump over to that. But I will just say also, and people, if they want more on this, and I'm sure you do, the good folks at the Valley Labor Report also have covered this pretty in depth. Also, some of the other things that have come out from the RBN, including interviewing somebody who's sort of associated with the World Socialist website, who have regularly sort of shown up and caused a bit of trouble.
Hey, just because you're afraid to criticize the labor aristocracy, a term, I'm very proud that I know, just because you're a Democrat. But we got a clip, from previous guest to this program, Shama Sawant, now doing media, I believe. Here is her, and this is sort of, I guess, a more maybe upscale version of the critique that kind of...
As the Associated Press reported, Merrick Masters, a business professor at Wayne State University in Detroit, said, quote, "The union didn't go after the company's big cash cows, which are full-size pickup trucks and big SUVs, and went more for plants that make vehicles with lower profit margins," end quote. So it appears that these are not strategic locations at all. And Masters goes on to speculate about the logic of the union leadership, saying, quote, "They want to give the companies some space without putting them up against the wall. They are not putting them right into the corner. You put an animal in the corner and it's dangerous," end quote. But this is absolutely not how you win a strike, by letting the company off easy. This was not the strategy of the 1930s auto workers who backed the auto industry bosses against the wall in every way. That is how they won. In fact, it is dangerous for the workers and the union movement to give the bosses the room to maneuver and undermine the strike by allowing production and delivery to continue during the strike.
Okay, so I want to get y'all's responses to this, but I will just say, this side of the criticism I think will be more comradely, because I think unlike other figures that, Shama is someone who is a genuine socialist, genuinely wants to see victory for working people. And if you watch the full extent of the clip, it's not a bunch of conspiracy theories about the UAW being overtaken by the Democratic Party. In fact, it's a lot of praise for a lot of the things that have come into into the public light via the UAW's media appearances and arguments and things like that. So more comradely, but still, this is a bad argument, and I think we can get into some of the reasons why here. I think maybe to start, I know you mentioned it earlier, Jacob, but could you remind people about the parallels between stand-up strike tactic and the sit-down strike, which if you watch the full video is something that they're sort of praising, saying, hey, this is how you do it, and what they're doing right now is not how you do it.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't even know this. I just knew that that the UAW was calling back to the sit down strike as something that they wanted to remind people of, and as something that they kind of see themselves in the lineage of and the tradition of in this stand up strike. But I really didn't know just a whole lot about the sit down strike. And, you know, to be honest, it's not like I haven't read like books on it or anything. Right. But I have, found out since, in response to this criticism, actually, that the sit-down strike was not a strike against the entire production of one of the big three automakers. It was, in fact, started at one facility, believe it or not, and then went to a second plant like a couple of weeks later, and then maybe went. I can't remember if they said that if what I read said that they went to another plant after that, but then they were able to get a deal. And so, it is actually it's totally in line with what they did in the sit-down strike with the starting at one plant and then escalating. It's like almost exactly literally what happened in the sit-down strike, except they're not sitting down and the shop floors, they're standing up at the gates outside, walking a picket line. And so that kind of a historical analysis was surprising to me coming from Kshama Sawant, because I do have more respect for her than I do these other folks. And like you said, David, I do think that this criticism was more comradely, and in the context of the rest of the video, there was a lot of history and context given that if you watch this video, you are not going to come away. If you watch that entire video, you're not going to come away hating Shan Fain, right?
But I sorry, not to cut you off, but like I do just want to note though that at the same time this was clipped and put out on the internet solo. So it there is, right. I think it's very fair to make the larger point, but also this was set out standalone, right?
As its own product. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. That is true. That's absolutely true. And so yeah, it just seems, ahistorical, not true, and again.
Sorry, can I just jump into
yeah,
it's both ahistorical and also like the metaphor isn't terribly convincing to me. Like it'd be one thing if the history was wrong, but like the strategy seems sound. But like the metaphor of getting the animal cornered, it's like what if that's your only? If you're putting all of your like eggs in one basket, and then what happens if the animal is able to turn? Like right. That metaphor, like that's just not persuasive to me. But again, like I only saw that clip.
Yeah, it's not persuasive that actually you should put the animal in the corner in all cases at the very beginning, right? I think that's a very good point. If you put all of your eggs in one basket, what happens? Because the person quoted in the AP, I mean, there's some value to that, and it did not seem to me that she engaged with that. If you put an animal into a corner, it can do some crazy things, and what happens if Ford and GM and what if they do some crazy things? What's going to happen then? If you're already, you've done everything that you can do basically once you're on strike, and there's not really a whole lot of escalation to do after that, right. and so so it's worth thinking about kind of the other side of what happens if you carry out that strategy.
See, again, like this is the reason that this criticism sort of frustrates me a lot, right? Is because, as you were noting, like this entire strike, this entire strategy from the UAW is built on the concept of escalation and being able to say, hey, if you aren't negotiating, we're going to increase the pressure on you. So it's not saying, hey, we're not going to go after the big money makers. Right. It's saying like, hey, like that's on the table and you guys better show up and give us the things that we want, or we will start hitting those kind of things. Also, as we've been noting time and time again throughout this entire segment, what this allows within the union and within the nation is something that's really important, right? So like, let's say there are members in the UAW leadership or people who might be on the fence, right? Who I'm not saying that they wouldn't show up on strike, but maybe would be more prepared to take a deal earlier than others, right? If they were engaged in this. Well, what this allows is for certain facilities to go on strike earlier, to build that enthusiasm, to build that confidence, to build that like emotional power, to then be utilized in a material and strategic way, so that, maybe those people who might be on the fence after 3-4 weeks of the strike going on, man, seeing the celebrations of your brothers and sisters in the union going on strike elsewhere, you're ready for your chance. To go and do that and to join them. This allows for you to build up that kind of solidarity, to be able to put maybe some levels of pressure, but I think more importantly, building up enthusiasm so
Right.
that when people are called up, they're ready to go. And look, I think this criticism could be, interesting or fair if we were seeing, for example, that the UAW sort of immediately started walking things back. But since that video came out, what has happened? More facilities are on strike across the country.
Right.
Right. And that's what it looks like we're going to be seeing for a while. So, it's just one of those things where like there's a kind of criticism to me that comes from people on my side, right? Socialists, right? That sometimes feels a little copy and paste, right? And it's copy and paste regardless of what the situations are. And the copy and paste is effectively that there's a lot of people in leadership who might sort of be on our side to a certain extent, but they're not willing to go all the way. When in fact, one of Shan Fain's one of my favorite bits from some of his live streams and talks that he's been giving has been the only question that like we have in front of us is how far are you willing to go to fight for yourself and for your family and for your union, right? So that is the message that's coming from within the UAW. Is like, we got to be prepared for a long fight, not, hey, it's time now, we got them scared to back down.
Right.
It's saying, hey, we're going to get these wins and yeah, we'll expand if necessary.
Absolutely, and pointing out that yes, now that especially now that we've had a week to kind of analyze what's been happening, they've expanded the strike and they've made huge progress at the table, especially with Ford. Just to go through some of them again, Ford's parts distribution plants were on a separate second tier that's been eliminated at Ford, and that's why this is why it's they haven't expanded it to Ford, because they've been able to reward Ford's movement and punishing GM and Stellantis's lack of movement, and by doing that, showing Ford we've got more to come if you don't meet us the rest of the way. So it's really been helpful. But Ford reinstating the COLA from 2009, giving up the right to strike over plant closures, that is huge. Income security for 2 years in the event of an indefinite layoff, immediate conversion of all temporary employees with 90 days of service, 13% increase in profit sharing. It's like these are these are big things at Ford, and not just at Ford, but GM has eliminated that tier of parts distribution workers. GM and Stellantis are no longer asking for concessions and profit sharing. So, the analysis is that there's obviously some pressure that these companies are under. Otherwise, they wouldn't have moved after the strike. If there was there was actually one of these people, and I can't remember who it was, said that this gives you, this is the opposite of giving you leverage. This gives the company leverage, which if that was your analysis, you really got to kind of look back and say, should I trust this person anymore? Because if it gave the company leverage, what would have happened is that they would have taken away things that they had on the bargaining table before. But that's the opposite of what happened. And so, you really kind of, if you're that person, I would encourage you to kind of, if you're serious about this, like, take a seat and think about, wow, why was I so wrong about this? And if you listen to that person, maybe downgrade your confidence in their analysis.
You're quiet, Matt.
I just said, well said.
No, I think that's perfect. And look, I think we could maybe at another date have a more holistic conversation about these things. But as I said earlier, it's just this. It's like there's a substitution that's going on that is sort of privileging a certain tactic and substituting through substitution, sort of saying like this is the radical option and this is not. But as I was trying to argue earlier, it's like these are tactics, right? And tactics are different from political orientation or even radicalism. They are tools that are being used. And I just don't see how you can be looking at what's happening right now and saying that these things aren't being effective. There are people who know way more about organizing and strategy than I, who might have legitimate criticisms of some of the tactics and strategies out there. So I'm not saying that there's no possibility. And if you ever hear any kind of criticism, it's necessarily wrong. But both of the ones that we just engaged with right here, which seem to sort of represent, I think, to different degrees, a kind of common one that we're getting from certain portions of the left, I don't find those to be very well rooted in the actual political reality and the material reality of what's going on with this kind of strike. So look, is there anything else that you wanted to add, Jacob, to that? I know, we could go for another hour if we really want to, but.
No, I think that's, really, that's really, I think, all that I wanted to say, and I've been really chomping at the bit to talk about this stuff for a while now because I can't stand it when people are wrong on the internet, and especially when it's in this area. Like it just gets it gets stuck in my craw, and I can't stand it. And this happens. Yeah,
I was mentioning some of these people, and I'm not including Shama here, but some of these people just stick to whatever bullshit you're talking about 90% of the other time and leave the unions out of it. Like, honestly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you don't want me rating your chat or your emails, then just stop talking about this, and you'll get at least this union boss out of your inbox. This union boss who is a bargaining unit employee and spends all of his union time on his own time. But that's what some people say. But yeah, their labor coverage. These people, the Revolutionary Blackout, not necessarily Kashama, but Revolutionary Blackout, those due dissidence folks, it's just always been universally terrible. I actually heard on Revolutionary Blackout that like the PRO Act was bad and it was going to make it harder to do unions, and which is just kind of, so removed from what's actually going on that it's crazy that you could actually say that and believe it. But that's what they say. They say that they believe this stuff. So
good luck with Jimmy Dore, guys.
Yeah.
I'm sure has been covering this very frequently and very responsibly.
Sure.
Jacob, I really appreciate talking to you as always, folks. There are links below. Y'all should definitely be listening to the Valley Labor Report if you aren't already. We'll have links to the YouTube channel, but could you remind folks who are in your area where they can listen to y'all on the old school radio?
That's right. We are on the radio. In Huntsville, we are live 9:30 to 11 a.m. on Saturdays on 92.5 FM, 770 a.m. In Muscle Shoals, a recording of the program plays at 11 a.m. on WZZA 1450 AM, and in New Orleans our recording of our program plays at 5 AM on 102.3 WHIV. So those are the places that you can listen to us on the radio, and if you want to get us on the radio in your area, then send us a note, tblr.fm/contact.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, friend. Everybody, Matt and I are going to go over to the post-game, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access. We got some good stuff from behind the vault for y'all.
Communism is here, and it's arriving through publicly owned grocery stores. And it's announced by Tim Pool. So patreon.com/leftreckoning.
All right, folks. And remember, just the last thing I'll say is remember, everybody, this is a time where it's very good to be online and to be out there publicly supporting the UAW, continuing to push those numbers up. Public support for the UAW is incredible. 75% that we've been seeing in some of these poll-ins. Let's see that get up to 90. So this is a good time to do your epic posting and memes and all that kind of stuff. And look at where these strikes are happening. This is a great time to show up at a picket line. And to be able to show your support in person to all these folks. But yeah, thank you so much, Jacob. And we're going to go over the post-game, patreon.com/leftreckoning. I'll see y'all back on Thursday for a Griscom stream. And for everyone else, take care.
Peace.